Hey, everybody. It is Susan Baracco, and I'm here today with my dear friend Tina. And thank heavens for people like Tina. She's an audiobook expert. And I am definitely not. So I invited her to join me today. I'm not going to get into deep introductions because we're here on LinkedIn. You can find her link in the comments here, and I'll show it after. But if you're looking for Tina, she's very available on LinkedIn and a bunch of different places. So I would love to just dive right in. And I'm going to start by talking about some questions that I had and questions that she finds she answers often about audiobooks to give you, if you're a debut author and you aren't sure whether or not you want to do an audiobook, this is a great session. We're going to be here for about 30 minutes or so. We're going to watch that clock and stay right on time, but we're going to move quickly. And we're going to start with our very first question. The first myth, actually, that we're going to dive into is that you need to love the sound of your own voice to create an audiobook. And it's a very interesting question. I love this question. So, Tina, I'm going to let you just take it away.
Thanks, Susan. The issue of not liking the sound of your own voice is fairly universal among humanity. Even when I speak to large groups of people who are professional speakers, and I say, who here likes the sound of their voice, I'll only get half the room. And when it's non-speakers, it's more than 80% of the room will say they don't like the sound of their own voice. And I get a lot of questions about this because my company, Twin Flame Studios, has a deep specialty in authors narrating their own audiobooks. So how do it comes up with how do you overcome this? Well, it's twofold. One is that you don't have to narrate your own audiobook because what sells audiobooks is the quality of the narration. So even if it's your own story, even if it's your own work, we can find a narrator that can have a good energetic match and a good key vocal quality match to your voice. So it's not jarring for a listener to go from listening to your audiobook to listening to you in a TED Talk or something else that you're doing, a podcast interview, for example. So I don't want anyone to ever think that because it's a nonfiction audiobook and because it's your story and because your friends and family have said, it's your story, you have to narrate your own audiobook, that you actually do have to narrate your own audiobook. But so that's certainly one thing. And we can talk about the narrating your own audiobook as well. But I wanted to cover that, get that myth out of the way first.
Absolutely. And I understand, too, that there's hybrid approach, correct?
Yes.
With this? It could be me and then maybe someone helping me out on that. Is that right? Got
Totally. Yeah, that's just one of my favorite things to do because a lot of the authors we work with are extremely busy or they involve a lot of travel. So they don't necessarily have the time to devote to recording their own audiobook. And some really prominent people, like I always call a hybrid a Tony Robbins sandwich. So if any of you are familiar with a lot of Tony Robbins work on audio, it's extremely long. It's 20 to 25 hours long of
Oh,
audio. No,
wow.
the man definitely didn't have that much time to spend in a booth. And so Tony would do the first chapter or two, introduce the narrator, and then the narrator would do most of the middle, and then Tony would come back at the end for the
At the
wrap
end.
up. So
Wow.
that's the version of a hybrid. What we do much better than the publishers who worked with Tony's books is we actually find narrators, again, who have that key energy and vocal qualities that match the author.
Beautiful.
Because if you listen to any of Tony's audiobooks, which by the way, outsold the other versions of his books, same with Zig Ziglar and a lot of other classic
Sure.
audiobook authors, their audio way outsold their print versions, a lot of times because of the length. Um, that they did not cast somebody as a narrator who sounded anything like Tony, and it always bothers me.
Oh my.
That's the case.
It's a great point because I think certainly as a new, I've never done an audiobook, and that's something I wouldn't have even thought about is, that match and how important that match is. So thanks for pointing that out. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
sure.
So I'm going to dive right into our next myth, which is that audiobook production is pretty expensive. And I think as the whole book writing journey is a really interesting one. And there's a lot of price points along the way. But and I think sometimes the authors get to a point where they're like, "Ugh, another expense."
Right.
But I would love for you to just really kind of set the story straight on
Yeah.
what does that look like?
I know, and there's a lot of folks in the coaching world who will say, "Well, is you're investing in yourself? How can you call that an expense?" And I get a little irritated with that. I used to be a business coach. This it's a long story how I got into audio, but I get irritated with that point of view because I find it very condescending. Expenses are very real, and if
True.
you're an expert or you want to make a living as an author, which is a whole other conversation, you have to, of course, you have to take your costs into account. And even if you're building a platform, which is most of our authors,
True.
consultants, coaches, experts, executives, folks looking to leave a legacy of some kind, um, you do have to figure in that expense. Now, in terms of being too expensive, I think what most folks would be really surprised to know is that audiobooks are actually about half the price they used to be to produce. Since
Interesting.
2009, that's a long time ago now. It's actually about half of what it cost in 2009 because
Really?
yeah, because you used to have to go into a booth. You used to have to
That makes
hire not only a sound engineer, and you would have to hire a director if you wanted to narrate it yourself.
interesting.
Two different people,
Got it.
plus your editing, mastering, distribution, but you also had to pay for the physical production.
Oh, that makes sense.
So
Mm,
it's this transition into digital that has dropped the price
tremendous. Isn't that
tremendously.
interesting?
So like
Mm,
99% of audiobooks are listened to through a service like Audible or the library,
sure. Right.
Spotify, those kinds of places. And the other thing that has come into play is just the accessibility of being able to do all of this work over distance. And even with narrators, right? So
Yeah.
narrators can now work independently. They don't have to work through the union. They can choose to do non-union work. And I'm a big fan of supporting folks doing union work. Don't get me wrong with SAG-AFTRA.
Mm,
And it can be prohibitively costly to hire a bigger name actor to do that. But if
sure.
that's what you want to do, you certainly can. So there's all different levels, and I love having different points of entry to accommodate different kinds of authors. That's
Absolutely.
that's really helpful. But so audiobook production can really vary from no cost up front all the way up to, you know, $5,000 or $6,000. It can actually go far more than that, but
Right.
quite honestly, most authors shouldn't be paying more than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good price point. Thank you for that. We're going to dive right into our third myth. And I have questions for you after if we have time. I have other
Oh,
questions.
oh yeah, we're blowing right through these,
Yeah,
so
we
we
are.
can definitely talk more about each of these.
I know.
Hmm.
Myth number three, audiobooks can't make money if your book is free. So first of all, if you would frame this up a little bit
Sure.
if my book is free. So um, I think that's a piece just to clarify for anybody who's listening, watching in, what do you mean by a book is free? And then how does an audiobook complement
Yeah.
a book, a print book in
Well,
this case?
there's a very common sales strategy or influence strategy that when you come out with your book, particularly the Kindle version of your book or the ebook version, depending on where you're distributing to, that for a period of time during the launch of that book, the author will give that book away for free in order to start to gain notoriety or
Okay,
to gain readers and
sure.
readership to do
Mhm.
that, or 99 cents or some very, very low cost.
Got it.
And so if you have an audiobook, which you're generally not going to be giving away for free, although I'm happy to talk about different ways to do that and use audiobooks promotionally, it's like, well, if you're offering the book for free, they're always going to take that version. Not true. What we tend to find in the sales research is that when a book is free, a Kindle version and they see that you have an audiobook version next to it, a lot of, particularly with nonfiction, but the people will get both. People
Interesting.
will get both because they use the print version or the Kindle version as the reference after they've done the listening to the audiobook, because audiobook listeners, audio is the most accessible form of media. You can listen when you
Absolutely.
can't read, you can listen when you can't watch. So they'll listen to the audiobook and then use the print version to reinforce their learning,
Ah,
because 9 times out of 10 nonfiction is used for some kind of knowledge gain.
learning.
And
Absolutely.
so it's nice when you have both. When you're promoting when you're promoting your Kindle version for free,
Got it.
we have authors that then will make money off of the audiobook version when they're promoting their other version for free, which is super nice. So you can offer different promotions on the ebook version, which has
Okay.
more flexibility in terms of its pricing on the different platforms, but then you have these other versions that you can make money from.
That's really
But there
fascinating.
are also ways to give your audiobook away for free, or to use your audiobook as part of your sales and launch strategy.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I would love to hear more about it. It's interesting. Do you happen to know, as I'm listening and thinking about this, I know a lot of people who listen to audiobooks when they're exercising or driving or whatever the case may be, commuting, that kind of thing. And I think, is there any statistic, and I know I'm dropping this on you on top of your head, but
Sure.
the increase in audiobook, I guess the how has that gone up? How has the demand for audiobooks increased in the last, handful of years? I don't know if you have.
Oh, sure. Actually, I could tell you in general, there's double-digit sales increase year on year for audiobooks
Okay.
from 2012, every single year up
Okay.
until 2023. And then so it went from an industry that was under $500,000 a year, or under 500 million a year,
Okay.
to 2 billion a year as of last year.
That's right. Okay.
So astronomical increase in the market from 2012 until 2023. In
Wow.
2023, still huge growth. We just happened to dip below 10% into 9%. So at a 9% growth, which is more what you'd expect in a growing, healthy market. Double-digit growth in any market is generally not expected for that sustained period of
Sure.
time. So
Sure.
basically what it means is we've kind of hit a level where we've captured, I mean, more than half of Americans over the age of 18 listen to audiobooks.
Audio.
It's
Yeah.
it's a tremendous number. It's like 140 million people
Isn't that
listen to audio.
amazing?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow, cool numbers. I love that. I think that's a piece, that a lot of people, again, they get very stuck on, "Oh, I have to write my book." There's this whole, that, and that's one phase of the book writing journey, is to write the book. But then starting to think about this whole, putting that effort in, that investment, making that happen, then, that's just I tell people that's just the beginning.
It
When you
is.
finish writing, that's just the beginning of your journey, really, is because then you've got all these decisions to make about things like audiobooks and print and where and how, and audiobooks aren't something, I think they're such an important integral part of how you get your voice out there, and how you can promote this. I think it's a great option for not a huge investment. It's definitely.
Not a huge investment. Even working with a company like ours, we're very mid-market, and
Mhm.
we stay that way so that we can collaborate with publishers, and we can collaborate with independent authors. Our full service done for you audiobooks, or done with you, all soup to nuts, all in, tend to be about $3,000 to $5,000.
Wow.
And that includes us really advocating for you and advocating for our authors to have the best options for their royalties, and and all the best practices on how to start to repurpose your audiobook for your marketing in some really easy ways that don't cost a lot of money at
Yeah,
all.
that's really interesting. All right, let's dive on. Let's move in. I'm just making notes here so I can get back to these questions when we get to
Sure.
the end here. So, the fourth myth that I want to talk about is, AI, because AI is such a
Mm.
hot topic, and you know, I would love to hear your thoughts on I guess there's an idea out there that it's a major threat to the industry,
Yeah.
especially to folks like you. And I think that also was, I deal with the same thing as a ghostwriter. People are like, oh, AI is going to replace you. And that's about as far from the truth right now as it could be. It
Yeah,
really
it
depends on
is.
what you're writing. When it comes to a full length book, there's definitely some benefit to AI. So I would imagine that that translates on your side too. So tell us a little bit about what that looks, how AI fits into your workspace.
It's interesting because in 2023, there was a lot of media coverage about AI and audiobooks, and the big six publishers started adopting AI for books, for audiobooks, really started looking at it as an option. Of course, we had some huge pushback in the market about voices being stolen, all
Yeah.
kinds of legislation
Right.
and lawsuits happening. That's going to continue. In 2024, it got very quiet about what was happening with voice and audio and audiobooks specifically. So I decided to do a deep dive and research kind of the state of the union as to what was happening. And I wrote an article about that. So we'll make that link available. It's on our blog on the state of AI and audiobooks in 2024 because I'm not opposed to AI in audio. I just want to make sure it's good. And that's where we really run into an issue. Eventually, I do believe, and we actually are keeping an eye on the market and an eye on different companies that are developing technology in this area. And there are going to be breakthroughs in this area probably within the next, I'd say, year to 18 months. But
Okay.
it's generally going to be more of a threat to the narrators who work in fiction because fiction works very differently than nonfiction in terms of its economics. In the nonfiction world, our authors are, yes, looking to get royalties from their books, but even more so, they're using their books to enhance their brand. And so the fact that they want and to create a really great voice clone, even now where the voice clones aren't fantastic, it takes 4 to 6 hours of recording.
Hmm.
If you go to a company that creates voice clones, you'll see a thing where it says, upload your voice, like a minute of voice or 2 minutes of recording, and we'll create a voice clone. Yes, they can do that. Is it good? No, it is not. Not for a long form like audiobooks. You could get away
Mm,
with it for maybe certain like social media purposes or things like that, but it's still going to
sure.
be very stilted. You can get a really great, for where the technology is right now, voice clone, but it's still going to sound quite different than your natural delivery. And in the article, you can actually listen to a natural voice narration and a clone voice narration using a highly professional voice clone. So
Okay.
it's decent. It really is. It was done by one of our directors who is also a professional audiobook narrator, Paul Stefano, but you can hear the same passage done both ways. And Paul licensed his voice through an ethical company that did it consciously, and it's really interesting the process to create a professional voice clone. So you really should hear the difference between the
Mm,
two because right now the nuances are in the emotion, the nuances are in the lack of breathing, which sounds really weird after a period of time.
that
Um,
makes sense,
and
though.
certain and it can't handle certain regionalisms. It cannot handle any of the Jewish sounds of voices, which I talk about in the article. It has
Okay.
a really hard time with anything that is non basic English. If you really go into other languages, like the places say that they can translate into other languages, it's not good.
No,
I
it's
would
not.
definitely would not do that. We threw a bunch of different languages in for translation for,
That's
people in my company
interesting.
and whatnot who speak different languages, and
Mm,
it was off.
it was on,
It was deeply off.
really.
So it's getting there. We're going to keep an eye on it, but it's not there yet for audiobooks. But that being
Definitely.
said, creating an audiobook and narrating your own audiobook, which is of course our specialty, would give you the body of work necessary to create a professional voice clone if that's of interest to you. So you really can kill two birds with one stone with that.
Isn't that interesting? I didn't realize, I did not know that you could create your own, have your own clone created
Yes.
for this, for these kinds of purposes. That's really interesting. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna
AI
get
is,
wacky in another year or 2 with
yeah,
people's voices.
yeah. I do the same thing with, I record my clients when I'm talking with them, and if they have an accent of any kind, which, and I do work with a lot of people from who, for whom English is their second language, so they have accents, and I send it in for transcription, and it's okay, it comes back, but I mean, I have to. It almost is. It certainly is less work than if I were to transcribe it myself, for sure, but I still have to be really careful about. I still have to take good notes, because if there's a point where they put in a completely different word that sounds that and you see that sometimes on TV, even on a ticker, on different,
Oh,
if
closed
you're watching
captioning,
it,
things like that?
yeah, the
Yeah, all the
closed
time.
captioning is like, oh my gosh. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
we
yes.
run into that with audiobooks too, because we also work with the authors who English is not necessarily their first language,
Mm,
and they want their voice on their audiobook. So depending on how comfortable somebody is and how coachable they are, sometimes it's perfect and it's like it just adds to the story, the musicality and the richness of the diversity of voice.
I agree.
And sometimes the author is not 100% comfortable with that. And then again, we're in a narrator search where we're really looking for a narrator who is truly bilingual and truly fluent in the language of the author as well as English.
Gotcha.
And certainly we can do translations as well and things like that. But we in addition to the hybrid version, which is a great option in that case, we also sometimes do a bonus chapter
Okay.
of the audiobook that's exclusive to the audiobook version. That's called interview with the author, and that's a really nice way to get the author's voice on in a more casual way, and it acts as almost like a book club type of chapter
Wow.
where you can discuss some interesting and deeper questions that might not get answered in the book. And then there's a lovely anywhere from 10 to 20-minute
Wow.
chapter that can also be sliced and diced for some really lovely audiobook promotion. And sometimes the authors will even film those and turn them into video reels as well. It's a
That's
really nice
what a
feature.
great extra marketing
Yeah,
piece. That's really nice. And I love the more casual, relaxed approach. I think that's terrific, because
it
it's, the
helps.
book, it's so, recording the book is work,
Yeah.
and you want it to come across so that it's understandable, and to, you're not speaking too fast, you're not, and talking about all of that. What kind of coaching? I mean, tell me a little bit about how you coach the author to get them ready to record their own voice for this.
Well, we work with the author all the way through their audiobook. So the author is never alone recording their audiobook. So
Okay.
we have directors who work with our authors, and we handle all of the technology. We make sure their setup is good. Everything's done remotely. We are the best in the world at this. Like, we invented the processes for doing this. And because I come from a world of business and entrepreneurship, I've always been creating this in a way that it was what I wanted as an entrepreneur, as a creator, as a speaker, to make it convenient for people like myself and my colleagues. And then the people that are on my team are all 20-year plus veterans of
Wow.
vocal narration. They're all vocal artists themselves. They're all sound engineers. And they've all been trained in techniques like active listening, because my background is a therapist and I've trained my team. And of course, they're all fabulously compassionate. So even at the point where we'll be on and recording with an author, usually from their home office, sometimes it's a walk-in closet. We set that up with them remotely via Zoom. We test their strength of their connection.
Oh,
All of these things come into
wow.
play. And then we handle all of the recording remotely, and then all of the editing, proofing, mastering,
Wow.
and any corrections that need to be made. Distribution options we handle for folks, but we never take any rights or royalties.
Okay.
So it's really a point of being advocates for people's voices. And I'm happy to say that we've worked with folks from all over the world, folks with learning disabilities, folks with vision or hearing impairment, folks with
Wow.
varying levels of accents. We try to make it so that we can be as inclusive as many voices as possible.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
love that. Love that. You and I are on the same page.
Yeah.
We have similar views on that. So I have a question for you. We have a couple of minutes left. I have one more question, and then I'm going to let you, go back to anything that you might want to dig a little deeper into. What is typically the biggest surprise for a debut author? This is the first time that someone's come to you to record their audiobook, have go through this whole process with you. What do they say typically is the biggest surprise to them?
Typically, the biggest surprise, and I hear this a lot, so it's right on in the forefront of my mind,
I know.
is they're surprised at how much they learn from the process, and it's twofold. One is how much they learn about speaking and breathing and the actual process of creating an audiobook that then translates into the rest of their communications. But
Okay.
the other thing they learn a lot about is they learn about their own work at a deeper level.
Really?
Because reading your book out loud to yourself and being listened to at a very deep level by somebody who is only there focused on listening to you and your work
Wow.
for hours at a time is a really unique experience. We don't tend to have that
Wow.
type of focus of listening and also hearing ourselves. So our authors often get insights about their own work, their own inner world, their own beliefs. They'll have all kinds of interesting kind of insights and breakthroughs that lead to other work that they then decide to create. And that always is,
Isn't that fascinating?
I
Love
love
it.
that so much.
I'm glad I asked that question. That's really fascinating. It's the same thing with writing the book itself too, is I think that
Exactly.
authors get into this and they realize, wow, there's so much.
Yeah.
It is truly, the book is the beginning. It's the entry point into all different kinds of things that I think most authors never imagined. And if you allow yourself to come into this process with an open mind and just see where it leads, it's incredible where it can take you. So we have like a minute or two left. And is there anything else that you kind of wanted to dive into that we can fit in? And then I want you to tell us a little bit about the program you have coming up too at the end.
Yeah, I think that what we always learn from our authors is, that it's this very twisty journey for them to have gotten to where they are. By the time they've gotten to the audiobook, it can be a little bit of an afterthought. And so I encourage authors to start thinking about all the versions of their book when you start writing, and in particular, after you've had your first draft. And if you really want to take your book to another level before
Mm,
it gets published and before you do your audiobook, read your manuscript out loud before you send it to an editor, even before you send it for any kind of developmental editing, because hearing yourself will spark more ideas.
yes.
You'll make corrections on things that make it sound more like you, more authentically like you. Like crazy run on sentences, you'll find you're like, I don't speak like that.
Yes.
Um, it will make your audiobook in the long run better because you'll have a better script to work from,
Sure.
and your editor will thank you.
Yes.
Because it
Indeed.
will help you actually understand and help you and your editor structure your work, because you'll
Yeah.
be thinking about it in a different way, and you'll catch things you'll never catch with your eyes. So that
Great.
is, uh, I like one of my favorite pieces of advice to give, simply because even if you never do an audiobook, it elevates the quality of your work.
For sure. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm going to have you just chat for a minute about
Yeah.
your program that is coming up, and then we're going to wrap up here because we're at 30 minutes
All
already.
right. Well, just really quick, we have an audiobook webinar that's going through other material than what we talked with today. Well, there'll be some overlap, but it's a more structured kind of dive into what it actually takes to create an audiobook, the best times to create an audiobook, the type of equipment you might need, what types of books make a good audiobook. And it's really a rich 45 to an hour program on getting your voice out to the world through audiobooks. So we don't have the registration link up quite yet. We'll add it to this certainly after the fact. But here on LinkedIn, if you just DM me, happy to make sure that you get that link when it's ready. Or you can just go to our website, twinflamestudios.com, and pop a comment into the contact us page.
Sure.
And we'll let you know when all the details.
Okay. And do you have a date for that yet or no?
September 19th.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
coming up
Okay.
September 19th, and there will be a replay.
Okay. So it's not that far. Not that
Nope,
far.
a couple of weeks.
Well, thank you so much. This was really a pleasure. I learned a ton. I took a ton of notes, and I hope everybody out there listened and got something out of this. I really appreciate you being here and having some fun with me with audiobooks, and wishing you all the best. Good luck with
Thank you.
with your program, and I may have you back because we may need more. We may need to talk more
Yeah,
about this topic.
we only got to scratch the surface on the marketing we can do with audiobooks. So
And that
that
would be
would be a
cool.
whole other thing.
That would be great.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you,
Well,
Susan.
thank you so much. All right.